Indians watch more esports content than any other sport, barring cricket. So now think about all the EPL games, all the Wimbledon games, all the Formula One races, and then think about that and think about where esports is, because people watch more esports than any of this stuff. So esports is the present. It is what is being consumed. The problem is the talking heads on TVs and people on panels like myself are all a generation removed from the esports consumer.
Our guest for the day is Ashwin Suresh, who is a visionary entrepreneur and has significantly impacted India's digital media and gaming sectors. He has founded Pocket Aces and Loco that are revolutionizing content creation and live game streaming for Indian audiences. His academic journey includes a diploma in filmmaking from the New York Film Academy and a master's in electrical engineering from the University of Illinois, blending creative and technical expertise. Ashwin's career spans diverse fields, from film production to investment banking, and as global chapter chair at H2, he fosters innovation in digital industries. His strategic leadership and multifaceted experience makes him a prominent figure in the evolving landscape of digital entertainment and technology. So before we move on to talk about Pocket Aces and Loco, I'd like to know a little bit more about you.
Sure.
So my first question for you today here is, with you pivoting from investment banking to starting a content company, your life seems to be full of big pivots. How did you decide to go from creating web shows to starting a game streaming platform, Loco?
Yeah, look, it's like you said, my life has been full of big pivots. I think about my life in several small components. I think of it in like 7 to 10 year periods, and I want to figure out how to utilize each 7 to 10 year period to bring the most satisfaction to myself. It's a very selfish perspective, but it works for me. So I studied engineering because I felt at that time that was what would really satisfy me. And then in the next phase, I felt like working in finance and banking because I felt it was the right sector to be in at the time. At some point, 5 years into that, I felt, okay, maybe it's time for the next phase. So it's always been phase-wise. And so media came kind of as that next chapter. It was something I was thinking about for a while. It didn't feel realistic for a long time because this is, way back 15, 20 years ago, like you couldn't really think of a media career as a very practical thing. There weren't too many jobs in media. It was a very freelance-driven model. And I didn't have the risk appetite to do that myself because I was more traditionally educated, in a very conservative kind of outlook on career. But when it felt like, I could take this, risk for a couple of years, see what that's like. So then I thought of jumping in, moved to India and did that. And then just like that, gaming happened. As we were building media, we saw this opportunity in gaming. We kind of accidentally stumbled upon it, and then we realized it was a large opportunity. And so now we're doing that. So I don't know what the next phase of life will be, but right now I'm enjoying this one.
Awesome. Okay, so my next question is, Pocket Aces and Loco are two different companies. How hard or easy is it for a founder to manage two companies at once working at different capacities?
Look, whether it's multiple companies or whether it's one large company, I think all of organization is a function of people and processes, right? So if you break it down into kind of the basics of what it is, it's about, do you have the right people in place, and do you have the right processes in place? So, and it could be as simple as a decision-making matrix as a process, or it could be something more complex as a reporting tool of some sort. But as long as you have the right processes in place and very capable leaders and managers running these processes, the complexity reduces quite a bit. As your career gets more and more complex, and as you're involved in more decision making, context switching is very challenging. So I often find myself starting the day with a meeting about, say, finance, and then an hour later I'm talking about product, an hour later talking about sales, an hour later talking about marketing, an hour later talking about content, and it's just so hard to switch your brain off from one track and switch it on to another one. So that's more than anything the challenge. I think we've been very lucky in the kind of people we've managed to attract. It's always been people who are pretty capable, who are self-starters, and we're also very ruthless. We think of ourselves not as one big happy family. I think a lot of families are not that happy, especially the bigger they get. We think of ourselves as a sports team, right? And I think that in a sports team, everybody has to merit their place in the side, and they have to earn it consistently. And it's not enough that you got selected once. You have to be selected every single day. And so if you're not doing your role well beyond a point, we will find a way to kind of replace you with somebody who will do that. So that keeps everyone kind of focused on the mission, focused on their role. And so then it also aligns you such that somebody else's success also becomes your success. So if you have people who think like that and you create an environment like that, I think it's very manageable. But we have been lucky with the kind of people we've had.
You talked about capability in people a lot. As MBA grads, I'm sure we would all like to know what are the typical skill sets that you're looking in a candidate when you're hiring at Pocket Aces or Loco?
The first most basic thing is first principles thinking. Like, I cannot stress how much we value that. Um, I think, I was just taking a tour of your beautiful campus and hearing how unconventionally you guys are building your curriculum. And I think this is what we need right now, because I feel the education system in India conventionally has forced people to think in a certain manner and not question anything. And you need to encourage a culture where people start to question everything and start to arrive at the basics, the fundamental truths behind something, because people always start their reasoning from a set of assumptions, and I feel like that's very flawed. So for us, first principles thinking is critical. Our interviews, especially in the early days at Pocket Aces, were very famous because they were very challenging, and it would often not be about the role, because I'm a firm believer that a smart person who's a very critical thinker can excel in any role. They don't have to come with, there are some technical roles, sure, if you're a cinematographer and you don't know how to use a camera, there's a challenge there. But largely, a lot of roles can be self-learned and learned on the job. And you need smart people to do that. They need to be very, analytical, critical thinkers. Integrity is a huge factor as well. We have a very high bar for integrity. And people recognize that, and integrity doesn't simply mean ethics or not lying or not stealing. It means also integrity to your work, integrity to the mission, integrity to your colleagues. So what that ends up being also often is we find if someone else is not pulling in their weight, somebody will hold them accountable. It's not a culture of where somebody comes and rats you out and says, hey, this one didn't do their job. They will go to the other person, hold them accountable. So when that happens, and then you're a 100, 200, 300 person organization, you have a lot more efficiency in the system. You don't need to really go and micromanage every single person and say, tumne apna kaam kiya aaj, tumne kya kiya aaj. Like, you don't have to do that, because people are doing it themselves and they're doing it for each other and for their colleagues. And of course, the last thing I would say is like energy. Like, I think organizations either have a sense of urgency or they don't. And often in industries like the ones I'm in, the sense of urgency is the deciding factor between life or death. And so we like people who have that little urgency in their being. That's not to say that people who are a little bit more laid back and kind of slower at these things are not good team members. But just for the businesses we're building, that sense of urgency is very critical. So we really give a lot of credit for that. And then my personal bias. I will not. This is not an organizational bias, but it certainly reflected me. I find people who played sports to automatically have like a higher ranking in my books, because a lot of the lessons in business I feel come from sports. I feel like sport is underrated. I wish Indian education really focused on sport a lot more. And it doesn't matter what sport, it could be anything. Team sports I personally find offer a lot of these lessons. And so, yeah, those are some of the things we really look for.
So, talking about playing sports, are you an avid gamer yourself, and did you factor this into your decision while launching Loco?
So there's no simple answer to that, because I think everyone's a gamer. Almost everyone's a gamer, right? The word gamer, I think, has been used very specifically to focus on people who play certain types of games. But the truth is, if you're playing a Wordle, or you're playing Candy Crush, or you're playing, BGMI, or you're playing, Call of Duty, or GTA, it's all games, right? Everything is a game. So in that sense, yes, I'm an avid gamer because I play a lot of video games, but I'm not a hardcore gamer. I don't play hardcore games, midcore games. I play a lot of casual games. That's kind of what I find more fun. And I don't think it had a direct impact into our decision here to get into the gaming business. The way we got into it was almost, we stumbled upon it. We had built a quizzing platform with Loco. I don't know if any of you remember Loco from 5 years. Yeah. So, have you guys played the Loco quiz? So we'd have that quiz twice a day, and Gaurav Kapoor would come and ask these questions, and you could win cash money, and it was a really fun product for a while. But it also got boring after a while, and we felt, hey, you know what, this is not going to sustain by itself. You have to build something around it. But we had this really cool, video streaming technology, very low latency, high fidelity stuff. The gaming revolution was happening. Phones became more, just more capable. You were getting these less expensive phones, but that had really good capabilities. Geo became mainstream. People were downloading PUBG, Free Fire, and starting to play. उससे पहले कोई 1 GB वाला ऐप कभी नहीं डाउनलोड करता था, but this suddenly changed in 2016, 2017. And we saw that happening, and we said, we've got to be opportunistic about this. Now, it helps that a lot of people in our team, including my co-founder Anirudh, are avid gamers. They really love gaming. So it does help. But honestly, I feel like if you're mission driven, then it doesn't matter whether you're an avid gamer or not, as long as you understand the consumer, their problem, what they're looking for, and then cater to that.
So let's move on, and I'd like to talk about Loco. I'd like to understand more about Loco now. So the central idea of Loco is to democratize gaming entertainment. How does this vision influence the creation of new products, features, and experiences on the platform?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say everything we do, and this is true for Loco as well as Pocket Aces, but since you asked about Loco, everything we do comes from the point of view of the creator and the consumer. And that's been the bedrock of our thinking right from the early days of Pocket Aces. It was always about what does the consumer want, what is the consumer psychology, what is the consumer behavior like, and how do you address that? We were never looking at it from the point of view of, this market has a gap and let's plug the gap. We've never looked at it from the point of view of, hey, this is a product I would like to consume. We've always said, what can we do to enable and foster this ecosystem? Because gaming is a very nascent ecosystem. While it's very large in India in that several people play some kind of game, it's not a very well structured industry. It's not a well monetized industry yet. And I think that we wanted to make sure that we did something to foster that community, that culture, and to create entertainment around gaming and help expand that ecosystem. So for us, it's always been from those 2 points of view.
Right. My next question for you is, what is the current state of gaming and esports in India, and how have you observed changes in consumer behaviors and purchase decisions in this space?
I think it's a really exciting time for gaming and esports. How many of you play games? I'm guessing some kind of game. And how many of you play like more mid-core, hardcore games? And console, PC games? Yeah, so a reasonable number.
It's very interesting though, majority of the males are into e-gaming.
Yeah, actually surprisingly, if you focus on casual gaming, it's a pretty even mix between male and female. And in fact, it's also an even mix between younger and older demographics. So the 35 plus and the below 35 are both pretty even. That's why I think gaming is truly democratic and truly secular in India. And mobile games are, of course, more popular because not as many people have consoles and PCs. But I think it's an exciting time because of a few reasons, right? One is gaming culture is becoming mainstream. There are more and more avenues for people to play. Gaming has become a social experience. So people are able to do this as an interaction with their friends. People are able to earn from gaming. And I think this generation, people who are born, say, post like 95, 96, have grown up in an internet-friendly world where they understand the potential of the internet and they don't have the trust issues that my generation or the generations before me had around the internet. And so as a result, what's happening is people are experimenting with transactions. They're experimenting with paying for, traditionally, as Indians, as a consumer class, we've mostly paid for value, right? We don't pay for convenience. But that's changing now. People are willing to pay for ad-free experiences. People are willing to pay for virtual goods. So the monetization around games is starting to grow really, really rapidly. So I think that's a very positive sign because that helps the ecosystem start to sustain. And obviously, if a consumer is spending money on a game, it means they're deriving some value from it, whether that's value, status, convenience. They're deriving some, positive outcome from it. So I think it's in a very interesting place. I think what needs to be done now is for a bunch of key stakeholders in the gaming ecosystem to get together and create a sustainable business model around it. I think there are too many fly-by-night operators who come in there, try to make a splash, do something, that's not sustainable, and then go away. We need stability. We need an ecosystem where the publishers are here for a long time, the streaming partners are here for a long time, the advertisers are here for a long time. Gaming orgs are able to make money. Professional gamers are able to make money. Streamers, content creators, everyone in that ecosystem should be financially viable for an ecosystem to grow. And I think we're starting to see the beginning of that journey now.
Moving on to my next question. Loco has secured funding from notable investors, including Hashed, Hyro Capital, Axeler Ventures, and North Base Media. Have these investors influenced the strategic direction of Loco in any way?
Yes and no. I mean, we've always made it a point when we work with any of our shareholders or any of our investors to treat them as bouncing boards, and seek their counsel, seek their advice. But we don't take direction, because I believe that the on-ground reality of a business is best understood by the team running that business, right? So if I'm looking for direction, I would rather get it from my team, my leadership team, my people on the ground. From investors, I look for advice. I look for patterns they have seen in other companies, lessons they have learned elsewhere. But they don't fundamentally direct how the business grows. From time to time, there'll be a strategic point of view. They'll say, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Have you looked at this market? Have you looked at that? And those are thought starters for us, and it gives us a place to start. But we've been fortunate, for the most part, except for maybe one or two investors. We've had investors who've been very easy to manage, very supportive. They are aligned with your growth. They're hoping that you do well, and that really benefits them as well. It's very rare. I can think of maybe only one investor that we've had or we have that is really just not aligned with the company, but everyone else is always aligned.
How did shows made by Pocket Aces go from being on YouTube to eventually being on Netflix?
That was all a function of grit and hustle. Honestly, we had no right to win in that category. What we had, however, was a desire to win. When we were doing shows, so we were one of the early people to do shows, right? There weren't a lot of finite serialized fiction in India. TV shows were running for 300, 400 episodes. And you didn't have these 6-episode, 10-episode web series. There were a few that started right around when we started. So we would have been the 4th or 5th web series that came out with the show called Not Fit. Little Things would have been maybe the 7th or 8th series, and it was the first truly breakout hit at the time. And when we did Little Things, before we even made Little Things, we pitched it to Netflix, and their response was a polite version of "Tum kaun ho bhai?" So we said, "Nahi, but we want to do this. We have this data. YouTube pe sab chalta hai." And they said, "Look, our learning in the American market is that YouTubers don't make good actors. So this will never really work for us." And I said, "No, but in India it's different. In India, actors are on YouTube because they don't get to be in films and TV like America, because yahan pe, it's a nepotistic world where limited opportunities exist. So the good ones are just plying their trade wherever they can. They're in theater, they're on YouTube." So they said, "I don't know, we'll see, we'll figure." So we made the season 1. It did very well. At the time, this is pre-Geo, pre-internet phones. We did, 50 million views. It was a ridiculous number. It was the most watched web series at the time. And then again, I pitched them. And I said, "We're doing season 2. Is baar to aa jao." And they're like, "I'm surprised that it did so well. Congratulations on the success. But we still believe our thesis that this is not going to really, scale." So then I said, "Okay, we'll make it ourselves." So again, we worked with some advertisers. We started making it. When we were almost done with the season, I happened to be in the US. And one of our investors, in fact, North Base Media, connected us to somebody senior at Netflix and said, "Go meet them." So when I met that person, I said, "Hey, look, the guy who's the decision maker, I've been pitching this show to him and other shows to him, and he just never wants to take us seriously. Can you put in a word?" So he said, "Okay, you come and meet him next week." But we were leaving. So we changed our flights. We came back just for a 3-hour meeting. We flew to LA, sat with that person who we'd been pitching, and he brought a colleague of his in. She happened to be the new person who was running India for Netflix, and she happened to watched Little Things. And she said, "I truly love the show. It's phenomenal. I cannot believe those numbers. How crazy is that? We have to be a part of it somehow." And I said, "You know what? We're in the middle of making our season. Why don't you come on board now? So it was like very fortuitous. It was just, most people would not have taken that second flight back to go to LA because you're like, why would I spend all this money for a off chance thing? But that really helped us. It was a stupid thing to have gone again, but we did it. And it was a stupid thing for her. Like, it was just dumb luck that she was in that room and she had watched our show and she had liked our show. So often I think you have to, sometimes it's about being in the right place at the right time, but the way to be at the right place at the right time is, just to focus on, um, so I believe the harder you work, the luckier you get, right? So focus on like hustling to get, like leave no stone unturned to get something, and somewhere or the other an opening shows up which you don't expect to show up. And from then on, it was like a 3-month process. They licensed the show from us. We were the second show, I think, after Sacred Games to come on Netflix India. We did 4 seasons. I think we may still be the longest running show that Netflix has ever had in India. And so it was a wonderful journey. And so obviously that opened the doors then to work with Amazon and Hotstar and everybody else.
Moving on to my next question. Pocket Aces currently runs 4 video content brands, that is FilterCopy, Dice Media, Gobble, and Nutshell.
Yeah.
What we'd like to know is, how did you crack virality through FilterCopy?
It's much like what I said earlier, right? It's you go back to the consumer layer of it. So if you kind of rewind to 2015, 2016, we were in a world where YouTube was the video platform, और आप YouTube link लेके Facebook पे share करते थे. That was how YouTube got kind of virality, right? You shared the link on Facebook, then somebody's wall you would see it, then they would share on somebody else's wall. Facebook didn't even have video at the time. They were just launching Facebook video. So we did a couple of things. We said, look, if we want distribution, we have to get somebody to watch this on YouTube, copy that link, paste it on their Facebook wall, write some caption. It's a very high friction exercise, and so you'll see a lot of drop off. But then we read that Facebook video was going to launch, so we said they may have an easier way for people to share that, and of course it was the share button. So we said, let's build a strategy that builds on Facebook more than YouTube first, to get the instant sharing, because we knew Facebook's behavior at the time was always this walled garden, right? You wanted to keep people on the platform, never let anyone leave the platform. So the minute Facebook video would launch, we knew YouTube links would get deprecated. So we said, let's build a Facebook first strategy. That was one very important decision we took. The second decision we took is we really spent a lot of time, we went down a rabbit hole studying consumer psychology. Why does somebody click share? What prompts you to share something to your timeline? Is it about something just that you liked? Is it about what it makes you look like? Like, people are more likely to share an article that makes them look smart. Politics ke baare mein koi article share karke, I'll look very intelligent, right? So that thinking was there. Or you share things that make you proud, like my city, my school, my country. So we arrived at a few things. We said, what are the things that people share? And let's focus on creating those things, because share will create virality. I don't have to spend marketing dollars. I just have to sit back, give people this content experience, this entertainment experience. They will automatically share it. And then we don't need to worry about copying a link and pasting it. So that really worked. And the first time it worked, we couldn't believe ourselves, because we were like, okay, that was pretty easy. We did it again, it worked again. Then we did it like 5 or 6 times. And we realized, okay, this is not just a fluke. It's actually the psychology of it works. And of course, then we use Facebook to build YouTube and build Instagram and build all these other platforms. So virality started off, and still remains, by the way, to this date. If you talk to Shreya, who's the head of FilterCopy, she still focuses on what gets people to share, what gets people to feel the need to pass on a piece of content. It's the core basics of that business have not changed. We saw a lot of other companies, when we came, one of the things about the Pocket Aces journey is we were not the first. There were many. There was Scoop Whoop and Culture Machine and PopXO, and all these businesses were there before TVF. They were all there before we came. But what we understood very well was understanding sharing, understanding how to get something viral on very low marketing dollars. We raised less money than all of these other businesses. We spent less money than all of these other businesses. We monetized earlier and better. We have the highest revenue among all of these businesses. And so it was very important for us, because in an industry where, you talked about credibility earlier, Pihu, where does Sequoia bring credibility? What brings credibility is actually creating value for shareholders. So there were many of these companies have had, investors who are from the venture ecosystem. Tiger has put a lot of money into it. Others have put money as well. But what I think truly set us apart is the fact that we created this value when we recently got acquired by Saregama, the music label. It created just such a huge financial return for all of our shareholders from the early days. It created financial returns for our management. It created financial returns for the founders. So when you have a economic success story attached with your product success and content success, that's when the credibility starts to kick in, right? And I think that that was what was lacking in that industry, because so many of these businesses tried a lot of different things. I'm sure they all put in a lot of effort and worked very hard, but just were unable to think about the business model in the way that we did. And so a lot of shareholders lost money in content businesses, which gave a really bad rep to that ecosystem. So it is important for us, beyond, of course, the financial motivation, it was important for us to set a precedent, and for us to basically show that you can make money with these businesses, and these businesses can be worth something. There is equity value to be created, and there are people in the market who will pay a premium for that because they value it. So, it all started with that kind of how do you build virality, but it has culminated into creating an example for the ecosystem, which I hope helps other entrepreneurs build successful outcomes as well.
Okay, let's just move on, and I'd like to understand more about the industry in general.
Sure.
So, what do you think of the future of esports in India?
I think we should talk about the present of esports in India. Look, I don't know how many people know this, but Indians watch more esports content than any other sport, barring cricket. So now think about all the EPL games, all the Wimbledon games, all the Formula One races, ISL, Pro Kabaddi, all of that. And then think about that and think about where esports is, because people watch more esports than any of the stuff. So esports is the present. It is what is being consumed. The problem is the talking heads on TVs and people on panels like myself are all a generation removed from the esports consumer. But if you go to actually see, we are a young population. We have 60% of the people in this country are below the age of 35. If you ask people below the age of 35 or below the age of 30 what they're watching, a lot of them are watching competitive gaming. They're watching esports. We're starting to see the same behavior in esports that we see in cricket. There is fandom, there are local stars, there's tribalism, there's clashes between rival, fan clubs and supporters, in a good way. And so I think that, the market for esports is tremendous. The attention on esports is tremendous. What we need to really work on now is organizing that, creating a viable ecosystem, an economic model that provides financial incentives to all these stakeholders so that it's not a loss-making activity. Today, most esports tournaments are not profitable. Not because people are not watching it, but because there isn't enough monetization built around it. Because advertisers are not as aware of the value they can get. Not enough people have tried a transaction-based model. So on Loco, we just piloted in November the first pay-per-view esports activity. I don't know if any of you saw that. There was a tournament called the Sky Championship 5.0. Did you pay for it to watch it? You did. Thank you. Thank you for voting with your dollars. But we tried that, and it was a huge success. We saw people willing to pay to get an experience. And I think, in fact, we didn't give them the greatest of experiences because it was the first time. There were a lot of teething errors. The production was not great. Our experience was not great. We're doing it again now in a couple of weeks. I don't know, Parth is here. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this yet, or it's not been publicly released yet. But we're doing another experiment like that at a bigger scale, a much bigger tournament, which will also be behind a paywall. So we have to find the right model there for this to become a profitable activity for all stakeholders. This is not about me as a streaming platform or somebody as a tournament organizer or somebody as a publisher. I think it's in everyone's interest for the ecosystem to develop. It is a mainstream activity. We cannot pretend that it's not. And so now we have to build an economic engine around it. So I think that's where I'm very optimistic about where this is going to go.
Right. So talking about Loco now, I'll just like to circle back and talk about Loco. Are there any specific programs or initiatives in place for talent development? So, for example, how does Loco bridge the gap between aspiring gamers and them achieving their superstar status?
Yeah, that's a great question. Now, at Pocket Aces, we also run a division called Clout, which focuses on talent management. We stumbled upon it by accident when we created the first set of digital stars, the Mithila Palkars of the world, and they wanted representation. We didn't have the capability, so we said, no, you can go elsewhere and find that. But we realized eventually that was a foolish thing to do. We should have actually continued to work with them and help them, because ultimately advertisers would reach out to us saying, can you put us in touch with Mithila for this campaign? So we realized this needs to be a division that we build. So we launched Clout, a few years back, and it's done really well for us. We manage some of the top digital talent in the country, maybe 130, 140 people. And it taught us a lot about the journey of a content creator, how one goes from relative obscurity to slight fame to tremendous fame, and it can happen overnight. You look at somebody like, say, RJ Karishma, who just blew up in a couple of years and became so huge. And it doesn't impact simply, we look at it from the outside and say, hey, it's great. Like yesterday I was not famous, today I'm famous. But it has impact, it has a meaningful impact on their life, on the way they have to live, on the things they can say, the things they can do, where they're seen, where they live, what it means for monetization point of view for them. So we have a very good understanding of that journey. And when we started building Loco, we approached it with the same mindset. We said, look, a lot of these people who are content creators on the platform start off very young. They start off without a very clear idea of where they're going to get. But we need to provide the resources for them to grow. We need to provide discovery. We need to provide some advisory work. We need to make sure monetization for them is as seamless as possible so that this becomes a sustainable path. You don't want somebody to spend a year creating content and then say, okay, now I need to get a real job because this is not paying, right? So we've done a lot of initiatives at a product level as well as outside of that.
Right. And how does Pocket Aces, like what are the strategies that Pocket Aces has employed to generate revenue? Because as far as my understanding is concerned, in the digital entertainment space, monetization models really vary. So how do these strategies align with the goal of creating fresh and entertaining content at Pocket Aces?
So I think one of the things about India that I've observed is that we're an extremely fast growing, very exciting market, but we still haven't built a lot of depth yet. This is the first generation of people who are very comfortable transacting beyond just something that's purely value. This is the first generation of people, this is our first generation of service class people who've become millionaires. If you just think about in the last 10 years what's happened, a lot of people in jobs are now dollar millionaires. That didn't used to happen. If you had to be a dollar millionaire, you had to run your own business or have a family business, or you had to be like one of these like exception, like you're an actor or a cricketer or something like that, or a singer. For the first time I'm seeing in the last 10 years, we have a generation of people who are worth millions of dollars purely by way of working jobs, right? We obviously have now this huge culture of tech startups and entrepreneurship. I think as this continues to grow, as these classes continue to evolve, you will see more depth in the Indian market. But for the time being, India still is a multi-revenue model market from my point of view. I think there are very few businesses and very few sectors where you can just kind of go in one revenue model and you'll find enough depth to build a lot of value. So we learned that early on. We felt that we had to build, obviously advertising was a mainstay for us. We had to work with advertisers in the beginning, just for the videos we were doing on FilterCopy and the series we were doing on Dice. From there, we kind of branched off. And then with Gobble, we said, okay, let's try a few different things. We launched a line of spices, which we saw some traction for. We launched a line of cookware, where we saw some traction. When it came to Clout, the talent management business, we worked with advertisers who were not keen on spending on publisher content. They wanted to spend on influencer content. So we found another pocket of advertising. Then, of course, when the OTTs came to India, we said, okay, here's another source of revenue. So you don't depend on an advertiser, but here's a buyer of content. So you had to create multiple revenue lines. We're doing the same thing at Loco. We're working with several advertisers. We're also working on direct transaction behaviors, as you saw with our VIP program, where people are actually spending on the platform. So there has to be, I think, multiple revenue lines for businesses like these. Of course, there are a few businesses where you can really drill down and you'll find one source of revenue drives a lot of value. But we're not in that business yet. And I think someday maybe we'll get there. But till that depth is created, you have to look at multiple revenue streams.
Right. And Pocket Aces has been doing content for so long. If you have to describe what has changed in content in the last 5 years, what would it be?
I think the last 3 years or so have seen, I think, the degradation of the potential of OTT platforms, largely because of its Bollywoodization. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Bollywood. I used to work in Bollywood. I moved to India to be able to work in the industry, and I think there's a lot of good that happens. But I think Bollywood also comes with a lot of baggage. And I think that anytime there's a nice new shiny thing, Bollywood finds its way into it and messes it up. Um, I think the OTT ecosystem was built on a very meritocratic culture in India when it came in 2017, 18, 19. It was merit driven. It was focused on just good content, stuff that consumers were voting for, right? Versus how often Bollywood has been built. But I think in the lockdown, when traditional film producers found that they didn't have theatrical businesses left, um, and a lot of their films were not kind of event-driven films and lending themselves to a theater release, they jumped on this kind of OTT bandwagon, right? As a result, it's a lot of the same malaise from the Bollywood and film traditional markets have crept into this, right? So now a lot of times it's about which face can you get on a poster. And the funny thing is, it's not even yielding results, right? So at least in a theater, a big actor can draw an audience to a theater. On the OTT platforms, if you see the shows that have done well, and I'm sure if I ask you here, you'll name shows, largely have just really good actors, really good storytelling. Like, there's not too many A-lister driven shows that'll be among the top shows that I can guarantee if you take a poll here. There may be one or two. There have been, it's not like there haven't been good shows, but most of the shows that will be in the top 10 shows over here or anywhere else will not have A-lister talent. Yet those are the shows that will get greenlit easiest, will get the biggest budgets to produce, the biggest marketing budgets, the most posters. So I think some of the the reasons Bollywood doesn't grow at the rate it could are now finding themselves to be there in the OTT ecosystem. So I think the selection of content, the decision making around content has evolved in that manner. That said, we always were very careful not to let go of our social media distribution because we knew that at some point when this system becomes nepotistic and driven by the same incentive structure as traditional systems, we would still rely on the consumer because for us, the easiest thing to do is get the consumer to vote. If the consumer tells me my content is bad, then I really have to think hard and change.
Moving on to my next question. Looking into the future, how do you see live streaming shaping the esports landscape, and what potential do you believe it has for the gaming industry?
I think it's huge. I mean, the consumption of most sport happens around the entertainment of sport, right? So there are more cricket consumers than cricketers or than people who play cricket, right? So I think live sport is exciting. It's a format that's been exciting ever since it started. We've never had an era where it's not even cyclical, right? People want to watch live sport in every market, boom market, bull market, bear market. That doesn't affect people's preferences there. And this is just that live streaming of esports is basically just getting to watch a sport live. The question now becomes, okay, which sports are popular, right? Today, BGMI is one of the largest sports in the country. What is that sport like tomorrow? Is there something else that comes and becomes really popular? Or are we going to be like the traditional sport ecosystem where cricket is the same sport that endures for 30, 40 years and everything else is a distant second or third? That remains to be seen. But I think no matter where that goes, the esports movement will be driven by consumption of esports content, which will be driven by live streaming. So I think that's for sure. However, gaming at a broader level, beyond simply esports, beyond the competitive part, I think has so much evolution to happen, right? I think you're going to see Indian games start to do well. You're going to see more global games penetrate in India. You're going to see different types of games beyond simply shooters start to do well. And that's exciting too because there's a streaming component there, but also there's a non-streaming component that's exciting about it. So I think overall, like as I'm sure it's obvious, I'm very bullish and optimistic about where gaming is going to go in India. I think it's one of the few consumer sectors that is just poised for insane growth. And if any of you are interested in the sector, you should absolutely think about building a career. This is the time to get in early and create value for yourself and for the ecosystem.
Right. Okay, moving on to my last question before we move on to the rapid fire is if influencers have to stay relevant even in 2023, what do they need to do differently?
It's a good question because every day there's just a new set of popular creators being created, right? I think the shelf life for a content creator is in their hands. By default, it's limited. By default, it's short. But the creators that understand that soon are able to create multiple revenue streams and multiple business models around it. If one is dependent on always just getting advertisers to pay for posts to reach your community, that'll work for a while. It'll work for a few years, and you'll make good money. You'll do well. Most people are able to build careers out of that. They'll buy cars and houses and create some base financial security. So people are creating like multiple revenue lines for themselves because they know that eventually the same thing is not going to work again and again, because at some point people move on to viewing other creators and other have different preferences. So I think that's very important. The sooner creators understand that, the better off they will be. And that's partly our job as Clout and Pocket Aces. We are we're entrusted with that responsibility to educate creators about that. We do the same thing in Loco.
So thank you so much for taking out the time and
Thank you guys. Thank you so much.
providing such valuable insights. I'm sure we all learned a lot.
No, thank you very much.